Hello there, boys and girls, lads and lasses, ladies and gentlemen. It's a little Sunday video to lighten things up after my last great creation. There was clearly a little bit too much for most people to handle, but that's the way of it. You know, everybody wants concise black and white arguments that are easily concluded today, so they can make nice clean judgments. Well, you're not gonna get it from me. You'll never get that from me. I think everything's flipping complicated, nothing quite adds up. There's always questions, there's always a little bit of mystery in there, there's always something you might get wrong, there's always something new to be discovered in every one of these great political arguments and all the rest of it, historical visions and blimmin' narratives and all the rest of it. Yeah, and here you go, a little Sunday thought as I sit in my van on a rainy day, trapped in my tiny little cocoon. Something that's been on my mind for a while, a little something that's not clean, it's not perfectly concise, it's not perfectly arranged. Something for you to scratch your budding beard over if you're a young man, get them wisps growing out, pull them down. Something for the strange eccentric to puzzle over in his cellar, do some doodles over, concerning the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Yes. Which is a nice muse, if ever there was one. I mean, you can't get a better muse than that. It attracts millions to its musings. And I wish to attract you to a particular quandary in the current image of what we believe took place there, of what is said to have took place. Here it is, my great question, my great quandary with the current theories. Before that, just to say, for me, the cutting and dressing of mighty stones is something which I think is doable by the masters of the Stone Age, those specialists of the crafts in their time. I think they were like, well, maybe unlike most today, but like the craftsmen of the ages, capable of great finesse in their work and detail, and I think it's perfectly possible that they crafted those mighty stones and that they determined ways of moving them and laying them into the mighty structures that we are left with. Those very feats, as I've noted before, and others, such as Sacred Geometry Decoded, have displayed. Why am I talking in a Cockney accent? Never mind. Anyway, those similar works are actually still being carried out on Sumba Island in Indonesia. They're still by hand pulling mighty stones up to 40, 50 tons with huge teams pulling on their organically made ropes in the traditional way, and only 50 years ago they did the whole job. Today they use a few trucks and whatnot to speed up the process, make things easy. They're not complete lunatics, but they still use the traditional methods for final placing and all the rest of it, and there are photographs of them before the modern age arrived on the island. They were doing it just when we were taking black and white pictures, black and white pictures of the amazing people there doing that. So, for me, that's not beyond the wit of man. However, there is something which I think is slightly beyond the wit of man in the current estimations of the construction of the periods, and that is this. The Great Pyramid of Egypt comprises, on estimate, of 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite. Some of those blocks go up to 30, 40 tons. I think the majority, if I remember rightly, and I'm giving rough estimates here, this is something, I like to make things that you can go off and research yourself, you know, you can put some more fine detail in it. It's not difficult It's all Googleable. But yeah, I think the average block is well over a ton. Big old blocks that are being used there. There is thought to, I believe, to be some rubble possibly in the core of the pyramid where things aren't being seen. But generally, yeah, it's generally constructed out of these very seriously big blocks that are all very nicely crafted, squared and aligned. The pyramid itself very nicely aligned, very nice straight sides. There's nothing rough about that work, about the vast majority of it. So here's the rub. 2.3 million blocks. How long is it said to have taken them to build it? 20 to 27 years. That is the time frame we believe it was built in. Well, if we do a little bit of simple mathematics, what I have done, because that struck me, brought up a slight question in my mind. If we do a bit of mathematics, here we go. 25 years, let's say 25 years, we'll be generous, going up the top end of the estimates. That is 9,125 days. Now then, in Egypt, on the Giza plateau, the shortest day of the year in December is just over 10 hours long. The longest day of the year in June, around the summer solstice, is just over 14 hours long. So we have an average day length, even a fool could conclude, of 12 hours of daylight per day on average to work with. Now, they did have oil lamps and other simple lighting means, but they didn't have halogen floodlights to illuminate their building site, obviously. So, I think it's reasonable to conclude that they probably didn't work 24 hours round the clock, particularly doing heavy, dangerous work like that, fine work, tying ropes and all the rest of it, in pulling stones and aligning things. You're going to be struggling to do it in poorly lit conditions under some flickering flame. So I think it's safe to presume they probably only worked in daylight hours. However, this is still what I'm about to discuss. If they worked 24 hours on a shift system, if they did light and work in these very low light, poor lighting, still this holds. But yeah, so mathematical. 25 years, 9,125 days, an average day length of 12 hours to work in per day. 2.3 million blocks divides down to 252.05, forget about that, 252 blocks lain per day for 25 years. That breaks down to, in a 12-hour day, 21 blocks lain, weighing over a ton each on the vast majority, 21 blocks per hour. And that means they were laying, according to what is currently believed, one whacking great block every 3 minutes. Now, I mean, call me a completely unreasonable conspiracy theorist and skeptic, but having done quite a bit of building in my time, I would say that the idea of precisely laying and mortaring in a whacking great block, which is over a metre on each side, I think, weighing over a ton every 3 minutes, is absolute poppycock. Me flipping other phone's gone off with me text on it, hasn't it? That's right. Right. Every 3 minutes. Now then, to just further exemplify the flipping issue we've got here, that means if we've got a single file ramp going up onto the lower, up the face, the lower face of the pyramid, that they're pulling stones up in single file with a long train of lads hauling on them ropes. Well, if you've got 100 people pulling, 100 lads pulling in front of a block sat on its wooden sled, and you're pulling it up that ramp, that means that that train of, say, 100 yankers pulling, the beginning of that train, if you take any given point on that ramp, the beginning of that train to the end of the block, that's a long, I mean, how long would it be? If you say you had 100 men pulling this 1 ton block up there, how long would it be? Let's say if the men are 2 men, are shoulder to shoulder, 2 men, 50 of those pairs of men pulling in a row, let's say that's 50 yards long, give them a yard each, bit more for the stone, so we say 60-70 yards long. Means the beginning of that train has to pass any given point and be past it, and the end of the block has to go past it in 3 minutes time in order to give room for the next train of men to be coming up. That's going at some flipping rate. Now, I haven't actually done a calculation on that. I'll leave that to you. You can do a calculation. How fast would they have to be moving? I think it's quite a speed, right? If each train's, say it's 100 yards, 100 meters in each, it's to go past in 3 minutes, pulling a heavy block up an incline, right? Anyway, we've got an issue there. That's tight. That's tight, and that has to be done continuously without fault. And some of these blocks are going way heavier. The lintel blocks going up to like 20-30 tons. King's chamber blocks going again right up there. You're not going to be able to do them in 3 minutes. No flipping chance. That's a big old chain, and I have problems with these chains anyway, because they require, you can't turn a corner with a 100-yard chain of men pulling a block. The men in the middle are going to be whipped off the side of the corner and fall down. So there's issues there anyway, but let's not worry about that for now. Compound pulleys, all the rest of it. Anyway, keep moving here. Let's not get dragged down. Now, laying one block every 3 minutes, to me, no, forget about it. Not going to happen, mate. So what can we do? We can say we've got multiple teams laying blocks. Now, if we look at the blocks in the pyramid, there's a great channel called History for Granite. It's a play on words. I think it's meant to mean history for granted. It doesn't quite work. I wish he'd stop it. But there we go. History for Granite. He discusses a lot of stuff, the details of these blocks in more detail. It's worth a look if you're interested in this. History for Granite. But yeah, all these blocks are, the vast majority of them are variable sizes. Each course is, they're differing depths, the courses. The blocks themselves, they're not all uniform, and you often have wider blocks and then little blocks squeezed in between them. But we can say that if we say that you lay the corner blocks of each course on that square that's making up each course of the stones on the pyramid, each layer, we call them a course in stoneworking. If we say they laid the corner blocks first and then worked out from them and met in the middle, right, along the edges, then you could potentially have, well, first 4 teams working to lay the corner blocks. They get them nicely aligned, nicely positioned up the side of the up the edge, get them laying in, and then you could have on each course from the corner 1 team working from each side towards the middle. So you could have 8 teams working at the same time. Well, if you had 8 teams working. And I know there's a problem here. There's a problem already. You might be foreseeing it, but let's just carry on with this thought, right? You've got 8 teams all working at the same time on those lower courses. That divides down to, now I just did a flipping calculation. What was it? Yeah, if that would mean to get that 3 minutes time for each block being laid, with 8 teams working, which doesn't quite work out because you've got to double your teams up to lay those corner blocks. But anyway, let's just work on the idea of 8 teams. Flipping heck, right? If you've got those 8 teams, that means they would each have 24 minutes to lay each block, right? So if you have 8 teams working together all at the same time, they've each got 24 minutes to lay a block, to lay 2.3 million blocks in 25 years time, given the 12-hour day length. Okay, right, that's a little bit more realistic. However, bear in mind they've still got to be getting those blocks up one every 3 minutes, right? Unless you have 8 teams all going up the side, each taking 24 minutes to pull a stone onto the site. And it's getting harder. The higher up the pyramid you go, getting 1 block up every 3 minutes. Let's not get bogged down. Just keep moving. Okay. So, yes. Now we come up to the second issue. We've got a nice, regular, standardized image appearing there. We've got this production line working, right? But it's not actually really like that in every sense. The pyramid has these entrance vaults, it has tunnels passing through it, it has the king's chamber, it has all these one-off features built into those courses of stones. The king's chamber has this huge, colossal structure built on the interior, which is a one-off. And it's not even I can't remember about the King's Chamber, it's similar, but yeah, basically it's a one-off build. And they can't, there's blocks of different sizes, they're not all, if you look at them, you know, each course, they're all varying size, they're the same depth obviously on the majority, but it's all locked in together. They're not, it's not like Lego blocks, they're not all the same width and they're just building all unit standard like that. Some courses have shorter blocks and then a longer block, then a shorter block, different dimensions. So we're not looking at a clear production line kind of methodology to build this. And when you take into account things like the King's Chamber, that's a one-off build and it's going to take a lot of time and concentration to get that right. And then to tie that in to the surrounding stones as the pyramid's going up, the surrounding stones all having to tie into that structure, which is all kind of bespoke work. It all has to be tailored to that specific stone having just been laid. You can't do that in, at least, it puts serious constraints on things, because that's going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait until that is completed before you can bot the stones up to it. So if it takes, say it takes 3 hours, off the top of my head, to lay one of the stones in the King's Chamber before you can move on to the next, scratch your chin over it. Is it going to hold the weight? Are we good there, Jim? We're good there, Jim. All right, Bob, let's move on to the next stone. It takes 3 hours for each one of those stones. Similar kind of lengths of time. Let's say we're building those passageways and we're building a roof over the entrance passageway with the vaulted roof with its great capstones keeping up the weight. We might have a weight relieving chamber above it. It's all complicated stuff that requires some, at least, you know, the Egyptian foreman has to stand there scratching his chin going, I don't like it, Jim, I don't like it, that doesn't look like it's going to quite, just shift it a bit to the, okay, we're good, let's move on to the next stone. You can't be racing through that. Well, if each one of those blocks, if there's say 5, let's say just 5% of the blocks laid take 3 hours per block. That means all the rest of the blocks have to be laying even faster. So we're getting less than 3 minutes per block on the rest of them. Now add to this, I've got another couple of issues, is when I mentioned you could lay the corner blocks and then lay in stones and join up each course along the edges and then fill in the middle. Well, when you get near the top, you can't have, there's not enough room for 8 teams to be working. So again, we have to strip that down. We have to give them more time because you can't have all those men working at the same time. And what is more, because we're working with variable sizes, if you've got 2 teams working for either side, all these blocks are varying widths. They're not going to know, or they're unlikely to know, unless they lay out all the blocks somewhere else and measure it all perfectly and then bring them all up in order perfectly and mark it all out. They're not going to know exactly where they're going to meet. Like when they get near each other, they might have a meter, they might have 20 centimetre gap, they might have... and now you do see these narrow stones placed in those courses like they've joined up two, like 2 teams have met and they've had to put a little connected stone in between to fill the gap that wasn't quite there to pack it. But they're not all in the middle. Those stones are often off to one side, off to another side, some of them in the middle. They stagger around. They're kind of generally, if I remember rightly, along, I think if I remember rightly from that History of Granites video, there's generally a couple of them running sort of down the sides in some places, but they change. They're not, it's not standardized. So it doesn't say that there were 2 teams always working, meeting in the middle, and then they put in a filler stone and took another. It doesn't say that. It says it was a more ad hoc way of constructing. So again, that doesn't signify that you could have 8 sort of production line-esque teams all hammering away. We've got another issue. If we've got this interior ramp spiralling up the inside, this is one of the construction ideas, and there is evidence of that ramp going up, spiraling around, that they're pulling stones up. Again, 1 block going up that ramp every 3 minutes, rigging it, tying all the pulleys, rigging it. That's light speed. There we go. I'm going to end that there. It's just a flipping problem. For those of you who like a good problem, to have a look in, do some calculations, do some maths, try and work out. Because that, to me, 1 block every 3 minutes, no, I don't, I'm sorry. I can't swallow that. There's something wrong there. That is ridiculously fast. And when you look at the working style, when you look at the crafted, all the variability that's laying into that construction, it's not all uniform build by any standards. The blocks are all differing widths. It's very much it's the kind of work which takes, each stone is slightly different from the last. It takes time to get it right. It's not a clear production sort of line methodology going on there. Routine, everything requires thought. And that 3 blocks a minute time, even if they worked all night, it goes up to maybe 5 minutes a block to get those 2.3 million blocks laid in 25 years. It just doesn't make sense to me. I really struggle with that. And the problems you get if you have multiple teams all working on different sections of the wall, then you have to slow right down to join up all those different sections. So it becomes, what's the word for it? Diminishing returns, because you might be able to have, if you have 16 teams all laying different blocks, but then you've got this problem of joining up all the gaps between the work that those different 16 teams carry out, then you've got to slow right down, cut a stone specifically to fill the gap where they meet. So you get diminishing returns on your efficiency there, the more teams you have working at the same time, and you're going to be tripping over each other, and and then having to have a large portion of the team suddenly stop. All of them have to stop and wait for one of you to finish getting that interior feature finish before you can start botting stones up to it. So yeah, for me, 25 years, I don't swallow it, or at least with the current theories of how it was done, and I'm not saying I think that means they had UFOs and space diggers to do the work. I don't believe that. To me, it says that I wonder. There's some of these more way out theorists, and I know they're they're obviously ostracised by the academic community and all the rest of all that bollocks, but it says that there's a theory that Khufu put his signature on that pyramid. Am I right here? Is it even Khufu's pyramid? Pyramid? I'm not an Egyptologist. I'm interested in the construction, not the flipping king's names. But says that they put their signature on the work of previous generations. And I think that time frame of 25 years has come out of the records from that period. As far as I'm aware, I think it has been kind of generated out of there. And it makes me wonder if there is actually some truth in that, because it took hundreds of years to build the great cathedrals, York Minster, Lincoln Cathedral. These structures, they took huge amounts of time for us to build in the medieval period, to build these things. And I look at the pyramid and I think that's hundreds of years' work, the Great Pyramid. Like, how could they possibly complete that in their relatively short lifespans? And given the calculations that I've just laid out, it just doesn't seem to add up with the sort of craft methods that they had at the time, that don't fit well with perfectly routine, standardized sort of production line methods. Production line is not the right word, but you see what I mean. It's that standardized repeating process. You can't use a standardized repeating process if every block's a different dimension. You just can't do it so very efficiently. So yeah, I wonder. I think there's something really wrong there in the thought that these went up in one generation, in sort of that a pharaoh would say, right, quick, build a pyramid before I died. It'll take them 20 years. I don't swallow it. I think they took much longer. And maybe they were claimed by one generation. But anyway, I'm sure it's contentious. But there you go. Something to scratch your chin over. An unconcluded question for you on a rainy Sunday afternoon. Here, take a look at this. It's a fair lad, isn't it? 150 flipping tons, I reckon that is. 150. I mean, there were some lads then, weren't there? Some flipping lads. Bit flipping mind-boggling. Must have built a good bottle jack in them days. Stay dangerous, folks. All the best. Cheerio. Bye.